Thank you. Your Excellency, Dr. Mohamed Abbas, Ms. Kepler, Dr. Kepler, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to say a few words about this exciting funding measure, GRoW, Water as a Global Resource. At the beginning, I would like to acknowledge my co-authors who helped me a lot to put this presentation together. And I would like to name Dr. Leif Wolf. He is from the Project Management Agency, who was overseeing the implementation, or is overseeing the implementation of this program, as well as Ms. Annika Kramer from Adelphi.
Stefan, just
Colleagues, when we think about the global water resources, within GRoW, three main challenges were addressed, which I would like to recap just for a minute. And the first big challenge is climate change. No need to say much about the importance of climate change and how it's impacting water ability and the distribution in space and time. And what you see here as one example is a map from the global drought distribution. And you can see that droughts are frequent, and also what our statistic shows us that they are becoming more frequent and more severe and also more costly for society. Another big challenge is the ecosystem services and ecosystem processes. And connected to that is, for instance, the biodiversity as a parameter that indicates the ecosystem health. And it is shocking, it is really shocking to see how rapidly the biodiversity has been declining on a really with unprecedented speed. So for aquatic ecosystems or population living in freshwater in particular, we observe a decline of more than 80% over the last decades. And the third big challenge that GRoW addressed or is addressing during this research is the water and water supply and sanitation targets. Dr. Kepler mentioned already the absolutely staggering numbers that are there. And what we see on this somewhat complicated graph is that people having access to basic drinking water. Mind you that the global SDG target is safely managed drinking water. But if you just look at basic drinking water, we see that between 2000 and 2015, we started at 81% and are nowadays above 90% of access to basic drinking water, which is not safely managed. But if we then look at the countries that have not achieved that, we see that only 1 out of 5 countries is on track to provide at least basic drinking water services to 95% of its population. If you look at basic sanitation, the numbers get even worse, and only 1 out of 10 countries is actually on track. This brings us to the funding measure GRoW, with the global goals were to develop tools that support the implementation of the SDG 6. Very much it was about combining global perspectives with local solutions. So think global, but also try to develop solutions that work locally, as well as ensuring transferability. It's not so helpful to develop a specific method or tool that works under very specific circumstances somewhere in a given country doing a different time scale. But it's much more, we were addressing also looking at ways of how we can transfer results and concepts. Therefore, topics that were addressed include water governance at global and local scale, global water resources, as well as the global water demand. To address all these topics, 12 cooperation projects were designed with a total budget of 29 million. Thank you so much, Dr. Kepler, for this contribution. And I believe this was a very good investment and with a high return of investment. And this is only the budget that the German Ministry for Education and Research provided. If you look at the in-kind contribution from all the private sector partners, public sector partners, etc., the real budget is probably much, much higher. Some 90 German partners participated, as well as 88 international partners, and in total 40 case studies around the world were executed, and you see the global distribution on the map here. I said before, it's about combining global perspectives with local solutions. So at the global scale, the researcher worked with climate models, with large-scale hydrological models, remote sensing data, as well as water trade analysis, very much at global or at least continental scale. They work with applications toward the SDG monitoring at country scale and also disseminating that for countries, and work with global actors, including the United Nations and its various organizations, national governments, global players, etc. But the idea was always to bring that down to the local level. So how do the methods really improve water quality monitoring and quantity monitoring, water technology, very much at the local scale. Not only looking at the SDGs at the national or global level, but also try to look at very decisions that water operators have to take every day, like operating reservoirs, deciding about irrigation, scheduling, or practices, etc. And not only the global actors were addressed, including in the UN, but also water utilities, water sector organization in the countries, in the municipalities, in the regions, farmers, etc. So it's really the mix between global and local institutions that were addressed. That has been done with a, probably somewhat classical design of a program structure with, you see here the BMBF, the German Ministry for Education and Research, which is operating through the project implementation or project management agency. Not sure what the exact English translation is for the PTK, who were overseeing the implementation of the program, and then a steering committee who looked at the contents development, but most importantly, the 12 cooperation projects from which we will hear in the coming 2 days a lot about their details and about their successes. Dr. Kepler mentioned before that this steering committee is very important, and it has been a distinct pleasure for me to share that over the last 3-4 years. But we have so many senior people on this board that if you don't mind, I take a moment to just read out their names, that you get a bit of feeling of what kind of caliber of colleagues who were attracted to serve on this board, and which included Dr. Uschi Eid. Dr. Eid was the former chair of the UN Secretary General Advisory Board on Water Supply and Sanitation. She's a well-known politician in Germany and also a former state secretary of the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Dr. Falk Schmidt is the head of the Science Platform Sustainability 2030 of the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Berlin. Dr. Barbara Gerhager is the head of the Competence Center Water of the GIZ. Dr. Alexander Grieb, he is the formerly water sector specialist, and I think head of the section also of the KfW, the German Development Cooperation Bank, as well as, certainly last but not least, is Dr. Ralf Buffler. Dr. Buffler is the CEO Europe of CDM Smith, a large-scale private sector player in the water sector. So with this caliber of colleagues, we have been trying to interact with the researcher, steering, well, to some extent, obviously steering, but also learning from each other and looking at ways to valorize all these findings. And therefore, I would like to mention also the national transfer program that was headed by Adelphi, Annika Kramer and her colleagues, which together with the researchers looked at various ways to transform things we learned in science, to transfer that to practice, policies, science and education, as well to the public in general. Doing that, GrowNet was facilitating the synthesis of the research results, and therefore this 12 projects with some 300 or so experts from research as well as practice produced a lot of knowledge and wrote a lot of papers, policy briefs, convened sessions at international conferences, national meetings, etc., etc. And that led to informing the HLPF, the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development in New York in 2018. It informed national ministries. It worked with development cooperation actors, as well as with the custodian agencies of the SDG 6 indicators. But it's not only a one-way traffic. Certainly it goes in both directions. While informing at the one hand, at the other hand, listening is sometimes even more important, and then reconsider the design of the research projects and trying to incorporate questions that the applied sector, the private sector, or the public applied sector really asks, that the research projects actually address important topics that we all are after to answer. So this is really a dialogue that happened over the last years. Colleagues, stay tuned. We have a very rich BMBF GRoW website where you can find project presentations, briefs, insights, publications, open access publications, synthesis reports, etc., etc. And stay tuned, because this is the final conference of the program, but we will still continue to populate this website with further information, with policy briefs, with information, PowerPoint presentation, publications, etc., that will help you to address your water problems, are they at global scale, national scale, or at the very local scale. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention. I'm very much looking forward to an exciting conference over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.